Hi, people. So, my long-standing subscribers might start to feel this is a bit of a hobby horse of mine, a bit of an obsession, but um, it's something I feel very strongly about, and I think it can never really be spoken about too much until something changes. I know that words alone don't change anything, but just for the record, I'm going to say it. Yet another case, yet another criminal case where a serious crime occurred and the defendant got a tap on the wrist. So go to read out the report because it's not too long, um, and then share my thoughts on this as always. The report's by Jordan King. Doesn't say the publication; it's just from Microsoft News. The Metro, from the Metro, Jordan King. A mum who was racist towards a group of Asian men before physically attacking another woman has been spared jail, but she needs to look after her son. Siobhan Cahill, 28, hurled racist slurs at some Asian men at West Ham tube station in East London on October the 7th, 2018. That's going back almost 4 years. Of course, there's a backlog with COVID. Another commuter, Lisa Wogan, saw the row and was worried Cahill might get hurt if one of the men lost her temper over the racism. Miss Wogan tried to get Cahill to calm down, but the mum afraid turned on her in the most vicious way. Miss Wogan is now suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and will need plastic surgery because of the damage caused by the attack in a London Crown Court heard. The judge told Cahill, the state you were in, whether through drink or drugs or mental illness, I don't know, but you were out of control and your attack was appalling. Cahill admitted racially aggravated wounding in a fray, but Judge Nigel Sangster QC suspended her 2 year sentence because she had to care for her severely ill 1 year old son. And the report continues, Judge Sangster also said he had taken into account how difficult the last 3 years had been for Cahill, who became the sole full-time carer for her son, and thus the dad of her eldest child in a car crash. On top of this, Cahill was grieving over her dad killing himself just 10 days before her hearing. Judge Sangster told Cahill, if those things hadn't happened to you over the last 3 years, I would have sent you straight to prison. Cahill's defense lawyer said Cahill has been doing counselling since this incident to partly figure out why she behaved in the way she did. She is in disbelief. Doesn't say anything about remorse. An immediate custodial sentence would have had an impact on her mental well-being. She has been diagnosed with various conditions: OCD, seasonal anxiety disorder, depression. She is the expert on her child, and to take her away from her children, particularly the youngest, would cause unimaginable upheaval in their lives. Cahill was ordered to complete 30 days of rehabilitation. She does not have to pay any costs or compensation because she does not work. So she's got a tap on the wrist. Well, firstly, I'm not going to criticise the defence lawyer because he's doing his job. That's what defence lawyers have to do. But Judge Sangster, another example of a pathetic judge. I mean, there's a few things to say around this case. Okay, she clearly has problems. She's clearly had personal bereavement in her life. That's a fact. Her father killed himself. Her partner died in a car crash. That's a lot of baggage. I'm not downplaying that. But the thing that really bugs me is when that is used as a line of defense for criminals. Why? Because a lot of people suffer bereavement. A lot of people suffer hardship. But are we going to give a green light to everyone who suffers tragedy in their personal lives to commit heinous crimes on strangers? I mean, the article doesn't say the nature of the attack, but I'd imagine some sort of weapon was used if a victim needs surgery, or the assault was so vicious that she's caused permanent scarring in some other way, maybe I don't know, fingernails or something. But the cruel irony is the woman was actually had her interests at mind. She was intervening, but she thought that she would be a victim of the men, although they were the target of the racist abuse. It just angers me when excuses like this are made for criminals. A lot of people suffer depression. A lot of people have personal trauma. Now, the issue with the children, I accept, is a bit more complicated because if she is a carer and she's in prison, that obviously leaves problems as to who will care for them. But there's a few things this judge should have done and failed to do. Number one, at least according to the report. Number one, why was there no review into how safe she would be around those children? I mean, if she's going to violently attack a stranger, is she safe to be around vulnerable children? The judge claims that she's an expert. Well, she's violent. I mean, I would have alarm bells there. Is she safe to be around vulnerable children? Um, by the way, the photo shows her smirking. She's leaving court. But time and time again, when we hear of these sort of offences, I mean, recently in the northeast, there was yet another case of human trafficking. A vulnerable Romanian man kept as a slave for 20 years by a traveller, and the guy got a lenient sentence because he had a heart attack. I'm sick and tired of these excuses being levelled in defence of criminals. I'm not talking about the lawyers, right? Defence lawyers have to do that. It's their job. But judges have the power to decide what sentence should be imposed. And there's a lot of question marks on this case. I mean, if she really can't go to prison because of her son, at the very, very least, she should be doing extensive community service. Okay. If she can't pay because she doesn't have the money, she's going to be on some sort of benefits, right? So some of that should be used to repay her victim requiring surgery or the PTSD treatment, even if it's a portion of that over time, because the rest would have to go to care for her son. But basically, she has escaped justice. 30 days of, what is it, 30 days of counselling? That is it. It's disgusting. Um, and it's just another example of a weak judge imposing a weak sentence on a violent woman. I do think there's a gender issue here. I think that violent women are far more likely to escape a custodial sentence than violent men. Um, I mean, I'm not ignoring the issue with your son. Okay, so those who want to say, "Oh, but what about her son?" I'm not ignoring that. I accept that that's a complexity to this case. But at the very, very least, there could be penalties outside a custodial sentence that reflect the gravity of her crime. 4 years on, her victim is still suffering PTSD and scarring. I mean, it's pathetic. But you know what really infuriates me? If you look up the name of any judge, try it. Try it if you don't believe me. Google their name into well, Google, yeah. Um, you will not find any email address. You will not find any office. You might find the address of the court. But this just reiterates my argument. The judges are largely unaccountable. And it infuriates me. It infuriates me because they are in a position of power. They're the people who are meant to be serving the public in terms of justice. They're not accountable to the public. Now, a judge can be sanctioned for disciplinary reasons, professional misconduct. For example, if they have an inappropriate relationship with a juror, they can be sanctioned by the bar. But other than extremely rare cases where the Attorney General can have a case reviewed, I believe it's at the Court of Appeal, that's extremely rare. Even if the Attorney General reviews a case, there's no guarantee that the verdict will change. Time and time and time again, we see damaging, destructive crimes getting a tap on the wrist. I mean, British judges don't seem to be living in the real world. And I'm not saying they're all bad. Occasionally, you get outcomes that do warrant the gravity of the crime. So you have judges who are a bit more clued up. But I do think they live in a bubble. I do think they do not understand the depth of public anger at the lack of justice in this country. I don't think they understand that every time they pass a weak sentence, that damages trust in the system. What I would like to see happen is I'd like to see judges being far more accountable to the public. I'm not proposing they be elected because that's a whole other element. It might have some inherent problems because you might have situations where, for example, if you had an area where there was a large population of conservative Muslims, you might have people demanding Sharia type judges, and I think that would be a mistake. So you'd have to have a uniform situation. But I would support a system where judges at least have to answer a bit more for their sentencing and have to justify their sentencing more. And I would have a situation where the bar or the legal system itself holds them to account. And if there is sufficient anger against a particular judge that over and over and over again they issue the same sentences, because it usually is the same judges. I've also noticed incidentally it tends to be the same courts. Carlisle Crown Court has issued numerous soft sentences over the years. So sometimes it is actually a particular court and a particular judge. I think the system needs to be far more democratic. Now, I am not talking about, mob justice. I'm not talking about the public, demand what a certain sentence should be. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm simply saying the system needs to be far, far more accountable. You ask someone in the street about our justice system, I guarantee the majority will say it's weak. I really do believe that. Um, I don't think you'll find many people will say it's about right. You'll get some people who are on the liberal left side of things, they'll say we lock up too many people and our system's actually too strict, which is nonsense, but that's their opinion. They're entitled to their opinion. I think they're the minority. I think the British people fundamentally are conservative with a small c when it comes to crime and justice. I think most people, this is why the Nordic system will never work in this country, because the British people would never accept it. They'd never accept it. Goodness knows there's enough discontent and anger out there at the sort of sentences we already get. If we had the Nordic system, which is even more lenient, I think it would create anarchy. I think it would really, really infuriate people. I don't like speaking out against our institutions. I don't like saying that they're not fit for purpose, but I do think there is a massive gulf between public sentiment and the way judges issue their sentences. And I don't really buy this argument that their hands are tied, they have to give that weak sentence. No, they have a selection of criteria. More often than not, they will go for the more lenient sentence. And I think it's partly ideological reasons. I think it's partly because they don't want to send people to prison because of the argument that prisons are overcrowded. But that shouldn't determine justice. If prisons are overcrowded, I think there's a case for building more prisons. And actually, far from being a Dickensian, like, aren't there more prisons, aren't there more workhouses, it's actually a practical solution because where you have overcrowding in prison, that's where you get tensions and that's where riots break out. Say, for example, you have four inmates to a cell that's meant for two, but you build more prisons, you ease the problem of overcrowding, you provide jobs for prison staff. Um, Sure, it's going to be controversial. Anything like that always will be, and no doubt people living nearby won't like it. So it can be built in remote areas, far from any town or city. Um, I really do think we have to take the idea seriously. Now, the Tories talk tough on crime, but quite frankly, little changes. I'm not saying that every single case is poor, but so often I am so drained with seeing the number of cases. I mean, goodness knows, if I made a video every time there was a pathetic outcome, my entire channel would be dominated by this. And I don't really take pleasure from talking about it because it's kind of depressing, but I think it's important. I just want to see British judges being far more accountable. I'm sick and tired of weak sentencing. So I think fundamentally there should be a situation whereby if there is a judge who's consecutively soft, if there is enough public anger, that judge should have their job on the line, or at least they should come under review. They should feel some heat. Clearly, they're not doing something right if there is extensive public opinion against them. And legal people will say, "Oh, but the public don't know the details. The public don't know the legal terminology." And there's a real elitist attitude here. Okay, the public can go on the information they have in terms of what is reported. And it's true that we might not know all the nuances of the case, but that's all the more reason for the system to be more transparent. Hell, it's in their interest. If they really are doing the job properly, it's in their interest to have more communication with the public. But as it stands, judges are distant figures. Unlike MPs, you don't know what they look like. You can't email them. You can't write a letter to their office. There's no accountability other than perhaps from other people within the profession, and I don't really count that as accountable because it's not really democratic. I mean, I'm not optimistic that anything's going to change anytime soon because there's no signs of that happening. The Tories talk tough, but I think that there's this fear in British politics that if politicians are too outspoken, they'll be accused of interfering in the independence of the judiciary. But surely elected politicians, their responsibility is to stand up for public interests. Now, politicians shouldn't say the sentence should be this, but at the very least, they can call for judges to be more accountable. I don't think that would be interfering in the independence of the judiciary. I think, if politicians started interfering in individual sentences and saying the sentence is wrong, um, that might be problematic. But I mean, a year from now, 5 years from now, I could be making the very same video. It's just really frustrating because I've been a victim of crime, and it's something that I've never forgotten. It was quite serious. Me and my family were forced from our home by yobs. So I know what that's like. And I just find it hard to respect people who are in a position of power, who are in a position of making criminals pay for what they have done, but time and time and time again, they won't do it. I mean, even if this woman isn't going to have a custodial sentence because of her son, there's definitely other things that can happen to her to make her pay for what she's done. That's not revenge, that is justice. As it stands, she's gotten off the hook. She clearly has a violent streak, so one can only hope these counselling sessions work. Because if she reoffends and she violently attacks someone else, then it will be on Judge Sangster's hands. That's another thing. When violent criminals reoffend, it should be the parole board and the judges responsible should be taking the heat for that. They should have to answer to the public. They should have to explain their decisions. I really believe that. I'll leave it there, but it really infuriates me, to be quite honest.